It was barely noon, but the schoolyard shimmered under a too bright sun, and the only shade worth sitting in was already claimed, half by a tree, half by the little ones who knew where to be first. Near the roots, cross-legged, sat a boy with a dented blue lunchbox. The sticker on its lid, a smiling cartoon sun with one eye missing, peeled slightly at the edge. The other kids barely noticed him, or if they did, it was only to laugh. A burst of mockery echoed across the courtyard. "Is that spaghetti, or did your mom mix worms again? Look, he's got crackers and ketchup. Fancy dinner." The boy didn't flinch. He gently laid out his meal, piece by humble piece. A single boiled egg, a few dry crackers, and a juice pouch that looked half-used. He smiled at it anyway, as if the contents had been arranged by a five-star chef. From a bench at the far side, overlooking the playground through the window of the administrator's lounge, a man in a pressed navy suit watched. He hadn't planned to linger. His driver was still parked outside, engine humming. He had a 1 p.m. meeting on mergers and acquisitions, a lunch order waiting with his name printed in gold foil. But then the boy said something, not to anyone in particular, not even loudly. It was the way he spoke it, soft, like a secret he'd long stopped expecting anyone to hear. "It's okay," the boy said. "Mom says pretty things don't always taste good." And something in the man, who hadn't heard a child's voice in years, stilled. He hadn't meant to pay attention, but now he couldn't look away. The boy peeled the egg with care, as though it might break if hurried. He then laid a napkin over his lap, picked up a plastic fork, and divided his egg in half. Half was for him, half was set aside, placed gently into the lid of the lunchbox. "She's gonna be hungry when she picks me up," he whispered to himself. He smiled again, looking straight at that sun sticker, like it was the only thing in the world that understood. It was the same smile kids made when they found a lucky coin or managed to tie their shoelaces just right. Behind the glass, the man shifted in his seat. His name was Damian Calloway. 54, CEO of Trionix Group. Married once, divorced once. Fathered a daughter he hadn't seen in 6 years. He knew how to close 9-figure deals. He knew the tax loopholes in 3 countries. He could not, for the life of him, explain why his throat had gone dry at the sight of a cracked lunchbox. He touched the edge of his Rolex absent-mindedly. It ticked too loudly in the silence. He took in the scene again, the dirt-smudged jeans, the worn shoes, the hopeful little son grinning, despite being partially torn. He hadn't eaten outside a boardroom in over a decade. 2 boys walked by and nudged the lunchbox with their feet. The egg slid, the crackers spilled. The boy, startled, scrambled to reassemble his meal without saying a word. No protest, no tears, just a quiet apology to the egg as if it had feelings. The man stood. He wasn't sure what made him do it. Maybe it was the voice. Maybe it was the napkin folded so perfectly. Maybe it was the way the boy said "she" with reverence, meaning his mother. He crossed the hallway and opened the glass door that led outside. A breeze hit his face. Warm, dry, not unlike the summers of his own childhood, the ones before offices and lawyers and stainless steel elevators. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle the child. The boy looked up, squinting. "Sir?" he asked. Damian said nothing at first, just crouched down, eyeing the egg. "Is that your lunch?" he asked finally. The boy nodded proudly. "Yup, my mom says it's got all the proteins." "You eat it every day?" "Not always. Sometimes it's just crackers. Sometimes she makes smiley faces with ketchup. Today's special." Damian tried to smile. It didn't come naturally. "You saving half for your mom?" "Uh-huh. She says heroes get hungry too." The boy's eyes twinkled with something more ancient than joy, a kind of acceptance, a quiet dignity. "Sir, I don't want money. I just want something warm for my mom." And just like that, just like those 9 words, something inside Damian loosened. Some part of him that had been clamped shut since the funeral, since the divorce, since the last birthday card he forgot to send. And for the first time in years, he forgot where he was going. Damian hadn't meant to sit down. He didn't sit on public benches, certainly not ones with peeling paint and chewing gum scars, but somehow his knees bent before his thoughts caught up. The boy scooted slightly, making room for the man in the suit without being asked. It was instinctive, unguarded, like he'd done it 1,000 times before with strangers who never stayed. A moment passed between them, not silence, just stillness. Damian looked around, noticing the way other children orbited in loose clusters, laughing, showing off their new phones, peeking into shiny lunch bags filled with name-brand snacks. No one paid much attention to the boy with the dented box. He had become a part of the scenery, too familiar to be mocked daily, too poor to be included. The boy broke the stillness. Sometimes we share even when we don't have enough. That's how it stays enough. He said it as he offered Damien half of the boiled egg. Damien blinked. No, that's yours. But I've got crackers too, and I'm not that hungry today. His tone was serious, like he truly believed the egg had a greater purpose elsewhere. The plastic fork was tucked behind the boy's ear again, like a pencil in a carpenter's hat. He picked it out, cut the egg cleanly with exaggerated care, and nudged one half closer. I insist, he said, with a tone that almost made Damien chuckle. He wasn't sure what made him follow the sound of that voice. A gust of wind blew a napkin across the pavement. The boy chased it, giggling softly as he retrieved it, weighed it down with a cracker, and settled back in place. Damien finally took the egg half. He didn't eat it, but he held it in his palm for longer than necessary. It was still warm. Strange how even that detail tugged at something inside him. "Where's your mom now?" he asked. "She's working at the place with washers, laundry things. She picks me up after, unless she's sleeping late. Then I wait for the bus lady." His voice didn't waver. There was no shame, just matter-of-fact rhythm. "But I like waiting. There's a cat sometimes." A cat, a lunchbox, an egg. It felt impossibly small compared to Damien's usual world of shareholder reports and quarterly margins. He glanced down again. The boy was sipping from a juice pouch now. He offered the last slurp to Damien with wide, hopeful eyes. Damien raised his hands gently. "You finish it." A small grin. "Okay, but only because you said please." The child offered him half, even though his own meal was barely a snack. Damien glanced at his watch. 12:48. His driver had probably started circling the block. The board meeting was soon. People were expecting PowerPoints, projections, answers. But he sat there instead, watching a boy eat a meal made from scraps, offering joy as if it were unlimited. The man's phone buzzed. He ignored it. Something else had caught his attention. On the inside lid of the lunchbox, partially covered by cracker crumbs, was a note, handwritten in purple marker. "You're brave, even when it's scary. Love, Mom." It had a sun doodle next to it, the same crooked grin, the same missing eye. The note wasn't new. It had clearly been reread, smudged by time and touch. The smiling sun sticker again, this time seen from a different angle. Damien exhaled. He realized he hadn't really breathed since he sat down. "I have a meeting," he said quietly, more to himself than to the boy. The boy nodded, unbothered. "Okay, I gotta do spelling soon anyway." He reached for the lunchbox, brushing off the crumbs with delicate fingers. He didn't stuff it shut like most kids. He folded the napkin, aligned the lid, and clicked it closed with respect, as if it contained treasure. The boy's lunch was assembled from a gas station. The man had just rejected a $500 sushi platter. "Thank you," Damien said, surprised by the words as they left his mouth. The boy looked up, puzzled. For what? For sharing. His voice cracked at the end, so he coughed to cover it. "You didn't eat it." "No, but I felt it." That made the boy smile again, and for some reason, it felt bigger than the courtyard, bigger than the meeting, bigger than whatever waited at the end of Damien's calendar. He stood slowly. The egg half still sat in his palm. Carefully, he bent down and placed it back in the lid. "Let's save it for the cat," he said. The boy giggled. "He only eats cheese." As Damien walked away, he heard the distinct snap of the lunchbox being closed again. Somehow, that sound stuck with him longer than the buzzing of his phone or the click of his Italian shoes on pavement. He hadn't felt this still in years. Damien didn't go straight to his meeting. Instead, after sitting quietly in the back of his chauffeured car, staring at his untouched lunch order, a truffle risotto with imported mushrooms and hand-folded flatware, he asked his driver to circle the school once more. "Just once around the block," he muttered, not meeting the man's eyes. As the car crept past the west side of the campus, Damien noticed a narrow alley tucked between a fencing shop and a closed dry cleaner. It was just wide enough for a small child to slip through. There, seated on a concrete step in the shade of a rusting drainpipe, was the boy with the lunchbox. He wasn't alone. At his side sat a duffel bag, a battered, overstuffed thing with a shoe poking out from the zipper. Tucked beside it was the lunchbox, open again. The egg was gone. The crackers had vanished. What remained was a folded note, now being smoothed gently against the boy's leg. Damien rolled the window down. The boy looked up. No surprise on his face, only calm acceptance. "You again," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You're not going back inside?" Damien asked. "Not today. She's coming soon. I wait here when we don't want people to know." He said it plainly, without shame. "We don't call it homeless. We just say we're between homes." The words sat in Damien's chest like stones. "You live here?" The boy shrugged. "Sometimes the van, sometimes not. Depends how hot it gets." Damien opened the door and stepped out. He didn't bother brushing his slacks. What would be the point? He walked to the stoop and crouched again, his knees complaining more than he let on. "What's your name?" "Micah?" "Hi, Micah. I'm Damien." "You don't look like a Damien," the boy said. "You look like someone who always gets their order right." That almost made Damien laugh. Almost. Micah twirled a fork between his fingers, then tucked it back behind his ear. "My mom says we'll get back on track soon. We just had some track missing for a while." Damien looked down at the lunchbox, which now sat empty except for the note, and tucked in one corner, a small white fork and a single wrapped hard candy. He reached to lift the lid and noticed a name written in blocky blue ink on the inside. Monsieur Daniels. Underneath, another line. "If found, please return. We need it." He swallowed hard. He suddenly remembered the year his mother made jam out of carrots. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Not to give money, he wasn't even sure what he was doing, but to take out a business card. He stared at it. Sleek, black, gold-lettered, useless. Instead, he tore the corner of a receipt and scribbled his personal number on the back. "If you or your mom ever need something, anything, just call or text." Micah took the paper, studied it like a riddle. "She doesn't like phones. She doesn't have to call, just keep it." Micah tucked it into the lunchbox beneath the note, like it belonged there. Then he held the lid open again. "Want to see something?" Damien leaned closer. Micah reached under the crackers tray and pulled out a folded paper, a drawing. Crayon lines, thick and uneven, formed the shape of a small van, windows with curtains drawn, a stick figure in the driver's seat, a smaller figure in back, and on the roof, scrawled in purple, was the same smiling sun as the sticker. A crayon drawing found tucked in the lunchbox, labeled "Our Van Home." "That's me and Mom, and our van. It leaks sometimes, but we pretend it's a waterfall." Damien nodded, unable to speak. The last time he drew anything, it was his mother's gravestone in a sketchbook. Before he could stop himself, Damien reached out and touched the edge of the drawing with one finger. It was greasy, crumpled, cherished. Micah didn't flinch. He simply said, "You can borrow it if you need." Damien didn't know what that meant exactly, but he said, "Thanks." At that moment, a woman's voice echoed faintly from the far end of the alley. "Micah?" He turned, lit up. "Mom!" She came into view slowly, tired, slender, hair pulled back in a rush. Her clothes were clean but worn. She looked younger than Damien expected, but with eyes that held too many years. Micah ran to her, holding the lunchbox like a trophy. "Mom, this is Mr. Damien." He saw the drawing. The woman froze, unsure. Her gaze flicked to Damien's shoes, his suit, the way he didn't belong in alleys or beside duffel bags. "We were just talking," Damien offered gently. "I saw him at lunch." Micah added proudly, "He didn't even take my egg!" The sun sticker now photocopied and pinned to his wall. Callback for later. The woman gave a tight smile, nodded once and said, "We've got to go." Damien stepped back. "Of course." Micah looked up. "Will I see you again?" "I hope so," Damien replied. As the pair disappeared down the alley, lunchbox swinging between them, Damien remained rooted on the stoop. In his hand, he still held the crayon drawing, forgotten in the moment. He carefully folded it once, twice, and slid it into his coat pocket. The smiling sun sticker again, this time, seen from a different angle. Damien sat in the back of his car again, this time with the drawing in his hand. He hadn't told the driver where to go yet. The air conditioning hummed quietly, and outside the window, the sidewalk blurred with movement. People going places, moving quickly, like he used to. But Damien didn't feel like moving. He unfolded the drawing again. The van, the curtains, the smiling sun. A home drawn with crayons. He tried to picture Micah asleep in the back seat of a car that didn't run right, dreaming beneath a leaking roof. That drawing was more than imagination. It was memory made soft enough to hold. The driver finally asked, "Sir, are we heading to the office?" Damien hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Slowly. He leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes. But Micah's voice echoed in his thoughts. "If you were my dad, would you forget I existed too? The words had slipped from the boy with no bitterness, just curiosity, like he'd asked the question before in different forms, to strangers who never stayed long enough to answer. Damien had no reply. The road ahead had never felt so far, even with GPS. As the car crawled through city traffic, Damien's gaze drifted to the crowded sidewalks. School bags bouncing against backs, children tugging their mothers' sleeves, others with arms full of groceries or bus passes, all moving forward, all anchored somewhere. He didn't notice that his fist had clenched around the crayon drawing until the edges began to crease. They were at a stoplight when he asked, "Do you have kids, Paul?" The driver blinked through the rearview mirror. 3? Why? No reason, Damien said, then added almost to himself, "I had a daughter once. Still do, I suppose." Paul was tactful. He didn't respond. They reached the office tower. Damien stepped out, greeted by the mechanical click of camera sensors, lobby security nods, and the polished floor that always seemed too clean to trust. He walked into the elevator, pressed the top floor, waited. But when the doors opened, he didn't step out. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the crayon drawing. The conference room ahead gleamed with artificial light and expensive glass. Inside, 3 partners and a guest from Zurich waited, sipping from tiny white cups. The meeting had already started without him. He took one step forward, then stopped. He pulled his phone from his pocket and typed a message to his assistant. "Postpone the one, family matter." He turned and walked out. The boy waves goodbye wearing a grocery bag as a raincoat. The man's car has heated leather seats. 15 minutes later, he was back near the alley, but the spot where Micah had been sitting was empty. No duffel bag, no lunchbox, no sign they had ever been there at all. The only thing left was a balled-up napkin, flattened by a tire. Damien stood there, staring, as rain began to mist the pavement. It wasn't much, just a light drizzle, but it was enough to make him pull his jacket tight. And then he saw it. Resting atop a nearby mailbox, water beading on its surface, was the lunchbox, Micah's lunchbox. He stepped forward slowly, almost afraid to touch it. The same dented lid, the same fading stickers, the same cartoon sun, one eye missing, grinning against the damp. He reached out and gently lifted the lid. Inside was the fork, the folded note, and the small wrapped candy, now slightly melted but untouched. But there was something else. A photo ID card. It was bent and faded, the corners soft. A picture of a woman in a hospital uniform, hair pulled back in a tight bun. The name, Daniels. A, beneath that, CNA, Midtown General. It had been wedged into the plastic fork slot, not carelessly left, deliberately placed. He stared at the ID. A photo ID of the boy's mother, found tucked inside the lunchbox. Why would they leave this? Was it a message, a mistake, or something else entirely? Damien's phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. He gently set the lid back down, then picked up the lunchbox and carried it to his car like it was made of glass. He didn't go back to the office. He didn't call a driver. Instead, he walked 3 blocks in the rain, straight to Midtown General. The lunchbox rests on the hood of the car, forgotten. At the information desk, he waited behind an elderly man asking about blood work, then approached the receptionist and quietly asked, "Can you tell me if an Angela Daniels works here?" The woman scanned the directory. "Angela Daniels, CNA. Yes, on night shifts this week. She's off today." Damien nodded. "Thank you. I'll leave something for her." He took out the lunchbox. The woman raised an eyebrow. Damien smiled, barely. "It's important." As he turned to leave, he stopped at the gift shop, bought a small blank card, and wrote inside with the pen offered at the counter. "Your son made me remember something I forgot. Thank you. D." He tucked it beneath the fork. Then he handed it to the nurse's station and walked away. He hadn't cried since the funeral, but today wasn't grief. The office was cold when Damien returned. Not physically, his building was climate controlled down to the decimal, but emotionally, sterile and echoing. The marble floors, the minimalist art on the walls, even the silent hum of the ceiling lights. It all felt louder somehow, after the quiet of that alley and the sound of a boy unwrapping crackers with reverence. He dropped his briefcase on the leather bench by the door and walked past his desk without looking at the blinking red light on the phone. Voicemails from Zurich, most likely. Instead, he went straight to the glass wall behind his chair and stared at the skyline. The city glittered under gray clouds, glass and steel rising above lives like Micah's. Lives the world didn't build for. He reached into his pocket again and unfolded the crayon drawing. It had gotten slightly damp in the rain, and one of the curtains drawn in the van window had smudged, but the little sun still smiled from the roof. He traced it with his thumb. He hadn't watched anything spin aimlessly since the day his daughter left. No, that wasn't quite right. That came later. This moment brought him back to a different time, a memory he hadn't visited in decades. He was 9. His mother had lost her job at the dry cleaners. There was no dinner that night, just carrot jam on stale bread. And yet, she'd lit a candle and said, "Tonight, we eat by moonlight." She'd made it feel magical. He'd drawn her a picture the next day, a house with a candle in the window. He wondered if she ever kept it. He suddenly remembered the year his mother made jam out of carrots. He sat down, slowly, still holding the drawing. Something about the boy's son, the one-eyed grin, felt like it had reached through time and touched something inside him that had long been boarded up. At that moment, his assistant, Callie, knocked gently and stepped in. "Mr. Calloway, the Zurich meeting was rescheduled. They're waiting on a new date." He looked up, but didn't answer right away. "I'll let them wait," he finally said. "Tell them I'm reviewing a different investment." Callie tilted her head slightly. "Are you all right, sir?" Damien didn't respond. He simply turned the crayon drawing toward her. She stared. "A child drew that?" He nodded. "It's honest." That was the right word. Not good, not artistic. Honest. Callie left him alone, and for the next hour he stared at the drawing like it was a market report that needed decoding. He saw layers, details, hope disguised as doodles. At some point, he opened his desk drawer and took out a pin usually reserved for stock certificates and ribbon-cutting photos. He pressed it into the drywall just above his desk and hung the crayon drawing, right next to a framed quote about leadership. The sun sticker now photocopied and pinned to his wall. And he didn't stop there. He went back into his files, something he hadn't done in years, and pulled out the manila folder labeled Calloway Foundation Dormant. He hadn't looked at it since the merger, since the tax advisor said it wasn't the right time. Now he opened it, and with steady hands began writing a single name on the top page. Daniels Angela. Beneath it, one son, age 6-8. Status, in transition. He paused, then added, "Crayon son, partial eye, full heart." That line made him smile in spite of himself. He began pulling together details, school district grants, transportation stipends, housing vouchers, things he had funded for others but never directly understood. Now, every box he checked felt like folding napkins beside a lunchbox. And when he stood to stretch his legs, he noticed something curious. On his windowsill, perhaps forgotten, perhaps planted there long ago, sat a paperweight shaped like a sun, yellowed, chipped, missing one eye. The last time he drew anything, it was his mother's gravestone in a sketchbook. He picked it up, turned it in his hand, and realized he'd never really looked at it before. Somewhere deep in his memory, a child's voice echoed faintly. "Mom says the best days don't look like much when they start." He stared out the window. No emails, no calls, just a single afternoon with too much weight in it to ignore. And a folded lunchbox now safely waiting at a nurse's station. His assistant orders a $70 lunch. He stares at a kid's egg sandwich. Before he left, he opened a new document. He typed, "Micah Daniels, future investor, current hero." He didn't know where this path would lead. Not yet. But something had shifted. Not loud. Not grand. Just enough. The crayon drawing now pinned to the school's hallway board. Callback seed for part 8. The laundromat was nearly empty when Damien arrived. It was the kind of place that lived between hours, too late for errands, too early for rest. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a tired blue. A single fan spun in lazy half circles. The walls were lined with outdated posters. "Don't overload!" and "We're not responsible for unattended items." Still, there was a kind of order to it, like someone was doing the best they could with what little they had. Damien stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure. This wasn't where he belonged. His laundry went out in labeled bags, handled by dry cleaners who addressed him as Mr. Calloway, and returned his shirt starched to the centimeter. But here, the smell was detergent and weariness, and that felt closer to truth than anything he'd worn in years. He spotted her near the back, Angela Daniels. She was folding towels. Her sleeves were rolled up, hair tied with a pencil, expression focused. The kind of focus that didn't waste energy. It was work done by memory, not mind. At her feet sat a plastic bag with the familiar shape of Micah's lunchbox bulging out the side. Damien took a breath and approached. She noticed him before he could speak, straightened slowly, and crossed her arms. "You came here?" "I did," he said, careful not to crowd her. "I didn't mean to intrude." Angela's eyes narrowed, more tired than suspicious. "Is there something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong." He gestured gently toward the lunchbox. "You left it at the hospital. I wanted to return it myself." "I didn't leave it," she said quietly. "Micah did." He blinked. "On purpose?" "He said you looked like someone who forgets how to smile. Thought you needed it more." Damien exhaled slowly. He hadn't watched anything spin aimlessly since the day his daughter left. Angela turned back to folding. A small pink towel slipped from the dryer into her hands. She folded it in half, then half again, pressing each crease firmly. "He doesn't know who you are, you know. Not really. Just said you were kind, that you listened." Damien sat on a nearby bench, its vinyl cushion torn at the corners. He didn't say anything at first. "I wasn't," he finally replied. "Not for a long time. Not to anyone." Angela didn't respond, but her hands paused on the next towel. "The child does homework under fluorescent light. His building has a chandelier in the elevator." "You work nights?" he asked. "And mornings, CNA shifts when I can get them. This job's just cash, no paperwork." He nodded. He knew the type. The invisible labor that made the world turn, but never got invited into the buildings where it mattered. She eyed him cautiously. "Why are you really here?" He hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. No logo, no fancy seal. "Micah gave me something, a reminder. I wanted to give something back." Angela didn't take the envelope. Instead, she asked, "What is it?" "A housing grant, temporary but stable, for single parents working full-time. It's yours, if you want it." She picked up the towel again and refolded it. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Calloway." "I know. Micah doesn't need pity." "He gave me hope," Damien said simply. "That's not something I knew I'd lost." Angela didn't speak for a long moment. Then, softly, "Do you have children?" His throat tightened. "A daughter, grown now. We haven't spoken in years." "Then maybe you do understand." The dryers hummed behind them. One spun a single pink towel, probably Micah's favorite. The plastic window blurred the world as it turned, like time circling back on itself. A chipped coin-operated dryer spinning a single pink towel. "I'm not asking you to take anything," Damien said. "I just wanted you to know. I see you, and I'll keep seeing, even if you don't want my help." Angela folded the last towel, placed it gently in the bag, then looked up. "I'm not proud of how we're living, but I'm proud of him. I just want to give him better." "You already are," Damien replied. "He knows more about kindness than most boardrooms ever will." For the first time, she smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. She picked up the bag, handed him the lunchbox, and said, "Tell him I made you give it back." He laughed softly. "Deal." The towel has the same cartoon sun pattern from the lunchbox sticker. She walked past him then, into the misting rain, her bag slung over one shoulder, the towel softening the shape of struggle. Damien sat for a while after she left. No agenda, no plan, just a man in a lunchbox beneath buzzing lights, with time turning in circles around him. Damien didn't expect to see Angela again so soon. He figured she'd take the grant quietly, or not at all. That's how dignity works sometimes. It doesn't shout or accept favors easily. But 2 mornings later, his office intercom buzzed. "There's a Ms. Daniels here," his assistant said, her voice uncertain. "She doesn't have an appointment." He rose before he realized it. "Send her in." Angela stepped into his glass-walled office in the same jacket she'd worn at the laundromat. She looked smaller here, not physically, but surrounded by the coldness of wealth, she seemed misplaced, like a handwritten note in a digital spreadsheet. He motioned to a chair. She didn't sit. "You sent a car to the shelter this morning," she said plainly. "I did." "You didn't ask me." "I didn't want to ask. I wanted to offer." Angela pulled something from her pocket, a folded, slightly crumpled housing form. She set it on his desk. "I can't accept this. Not this way." Damien's eyes softened. "It's not a transaction." "But it feels like a rescue," she replied. "And I don't need rescuing. I need a fair shot." There it was, the invisible line drawn in her voice. Not anger, not pride. Something deeper. The quiet refusal to be someone's good deed. Her eyes reminded him of courtroom witnesses, strong but cracked at the edges. He nodded slowly. "Then let's change how it's offered." Angela tilted her head. "I want to create a position, at my foundation, outreach coordinator, Liaison for families in transition, salary, benefits, a small team eventually. You just thought of that now? She asked, skeptical. No, he said honestly. I thought of it the moment your son handed me his lunch. Silence. Angela looked down at the form, then at the office around her, pristine, emotionless, 1,000 feet above the city where people like her folded towels for cash. I'd have to work more hours, she said. You'd work real ones, Damien replied, not invisible ones. She folds towels for minimum wage while he signs papers that close companies. She didn't pick up the form. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out something else. Micah's drawing, the original, not the photocopy. I found this in the back seat, she said. He said you might need it more. Damien stared at the familiar crayon lines, the crooked sun still smiling from the roof of the van. He's more generous than most adults I know, he said. Angela nodded. He always has been. Then she asked, why now? He paused. Because somewhere between your son's drawing and your refusal to be pitied, I remembered what my mother looked like when she worked nights and packed my lunch with whatever we had. Angela's expression changed, softer now, as if recognizing something behind his eyes that hadn't been visible before. Then let's make it a job, she said. Damien stood and offered his hand. She shook it, firm and clean. And I want my own key, she added. No favors. Agreed. Before she left, she looked down at the corner of his desk, where a framed copy of Micah's drawing sat beside an investor award. You hung it, she said. He's the only reason this office has any color now. She smiled again, just slightly, and walked out. The egg sandwich again. She quietly packed it that morning for her son. Callback. Damien stood alone for a moment, staring after her. He thought of all the decisions he'd made out of strategy, all the mergers crafted in silence, all the meetings where no one looked anyone else in the eye. This had been different. There had been no pitch. Just a child, a lunchbox, a line drawn not in ink but in quiet conviction. And the next morning, the intercom buzzed again. Sir, there's a delivery here. It's addressed to Mr. Damien Calloway, Smile Practice Kit. He raised an eyebrow. Bring it in. It was a paper bag. Inside, 1 boiled egg, a sleeve of crackers, and a juice pouch. No name, no note. He laughed. The crayon drawing now pinned to the school's hallway board. Callback for next part. That afternoon, he left early. Not for a meeting, for a cafeteria visit. The school cafeteria buzzed with morning chatter, the kind that filled the air with the friction of trays, half-laugh jokes, and sneakers squeaking on linoleum. Damien had never set foot in one since his own school days, but it smelled exactly as he remembered, like milk, damp sweaters, and something slightly burnt pretending to be toast. He stepped inside quietly, unnoticed at first. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. Today he had opted for a soft blue sweater and slacks, an effort to feel less like a visitor from another world. But even then, he still stood out. At a corner table near the windows, Micah sat with his back to the room, quietly unwrapping his sandwich. He wasn't alone this time. 3 kids sat near him, not close enough to be friends, but not far enough to be ignoring him either. The lunchbox was still the same, dented, sticker faded. But today, it had company. A handmade card sat beside it, folded from the torn wrapper of a juice box, colored with pencil stub scribbles. Micah handed it to the girl beside him and said, "It's for you. You looked sad yesterday." The girl blinked. "Why?" Micah shrugged. "When my mom looked like that, I gave her a card." And then she smiled a little. "Today I'm trading my sandwich for a smile. Want one?" Damien stood still, caught in the doorway. He hadn't meant to stay long, just to check in, just to see. But he walked forward anyway. The boy saw him and lit up immediately. "Hey, you didn't forget how to smile, huh?" "They're still working on it," Damien replied, sliding into the empty seat across from him. Micah reached into his lunchbox and pulled out something carefully wrapped in paper towel. "It's a thank you sandwich," he said. "Half for you, half for me. It's not egg today, though." Damien unwrapped his half and found peanut butter with banana slices. He smiled. "That was my favorite once." "It still is," Micah said confidently. He had spent millions building homes, but never visited the ones that truly mattered. Damien looked around. The kids weren't just watching anymore. They were inching closer. One asked Micah about his drawing. Another peeked into the lunchbox like it was a treasure chest. Something was shifting, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with presence. Across the cafeteria, on the hallway board where student art was posted each week, a new drawing had been pinned. It wasn't Micah's original. It was a photocopy, slightly enlarged. A van, curtains drawn, a crooked sun. Beneath it, in a child's block print, "Home is who you wait for." The crayon drawing now pinned to the school's hallway board. Damien stood and walked toward it slowly. He traced the edges with his eyes. A teacher approached him quietly. "You're the one who brought this?" He nodded. She smiled. "Micah's always been gentle, but this week, he's been radiant. Whatever you did, thank you." "I listened," Damien said. "He did the rest." Before he left, he turned back to the lunch table. Micah was handing out folded cards to two more kids. One had a tear in her sleeve. The other had Velcro shoes and eyes that flicked around the room like he didn't want to be noticed. Micah placed his hand gently over the cards. "You gotta open them later. Smiles work better when they surprise you." The other children now sit around the boy, not away from him. As Damien reached the door, Micah called out, "Wait!" He turned. Micah ran toward him and pressed something into his hand. It was a keychain, a plastic sun, the kind you get from a vending machine, yellow with one googly eye missing. "For luck," Micah said, "in case you forget how to smile again." A small sun keychain handed to the man, "For luck." Damien bent down and said, "I'll keep it with me." Micah leaned in, whispered, "Even when you wear your suit, don't forget to be soft." Damien smiled. "I won't." He walked back to his car, keychain in hand, lunchbox in his bag, and in his chest something settled, not in a dramatic way. Just enough. Just right. The smell of syrup clung to the air like comfort that refused to leave. It was Sunday morning, and the diner on 48th and Marlowe was humming with the gentle rhythm of clinking silverware, coffee refills, and eggs frying on an overworked griddle. It wasn't a fancy place. No reservations, no glossy menus, just chip booths, cracked vinyl cushions, and pancakes that always came out smiling, an accidental quirk of the cook's wrist. Damien had never been a Sunday breakfast kind of man. Mornings, for most of his life, were transactional. Emails, espresso, meetings by 9 Sue. But now, as he stepped through the fogged-up glass door and spotted a small table near the corner, he realized something had changed. They were already there. Angela sat on one side, her hair down today, the weight beneath her eyes softer than before. Micah sat opposite her, carefully balancing a small plastic container of maple syrup like it contained gold. When he saw Damien, he waved so hard the syrup nearly tipped. "You're late," Micah grinned. Damien smiled as he slid into the booth beside him. "I was getting lost. Turns out Sunday smells different than Monday." He once skipped breakfast for years. Now he waited for this one all week. The waitress came by, recognizing them all now. She didn't write anything down, just nodded. 2 chocolate chip pancakes, 1 with banana slices, 1 plain omelet, no cheese, and coffee. Micah leaned in. "She calls me Banana Boss now." "I can see why." Angela sipped her tea, watching the exchange with quiet amusement. She hadn't said much since joining the foundation 2 weeks ago, but her presence had reshaped the office culture. People greeted her with genuine warmth. She returned it. She knew the names of every janitor, remembered birthdays without reminders. Damien looked at her and said, "How's the new place?" "Small, but it has a door we can lock and windows that open, and Micah can hang things on the wall." "I already put up the sun," Micah added, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a tiny sticker. "Backup version." Damien smiled. Their food arrived. The pancakes, as always, wore accidental smiles. "We like this place because the pancakes smile back." Micah offered Damien half of one, cutting it neatly with his fork. "This is for last time. I forgot your sandwich." "Consider us even," Damien said, taking the half. They ate mostly in silence, the way people do when they're learning how to be comfortable together. There was no rush, no pending contract. Just the warmth of syrup, soft forks, and a table built on something earned quietly. After breakfast, they stepped outside into the crisp morning light. The street was quieter than usual. Angela walked ahead to hail a cab for their next errand, leaving Micah and Damien standing near the window. Micah reached into his backpack and pulled out something new, a lunchbox. This one was brand new, but it had the same shape, the same compartments. Only this time, the sun sticker was applied straight, with both eyes carefully drawn in. "Look," Micah said proudly. "She got me a new one, but I told her it has to look a little like the old one." The boy opens his new lunchbox, a replica of the old one, still with the same sticker. Damien took it in his hands and opened it gently. Inside, instead of food, was a folded paper. He recognized the drawing, another crayon sketch. This one was different. 3 stick figures now, not 2. A van still, but next to it, a tall man in a blue sweater holding a sandwich. He looked at Micah, who shrugged. I added you. You're good at being in drawings now. Damien blinked hard. Micah handed him the paper. Keep it. You look happier in this one. He wasn't sure who was helping whom anymore. Angela called out from the cab. Come on, Micah. He ran to her, waving behind him. Next Sunday, same pancakes. Damien waved back, the drawing clutched carefully in his hand. As they drove away, he stood on the sidewalk for a long time, the morning sun warming the top of his head. The keychain in his pocket shifted with each breeze, one googly eye still missing, the other staring upward. He didn't check his phone, didn't open a single app. He just stood there, smiling at nothing in particular. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in the quiet. The fog hung low over the city that morning, blurring the skyline into soft edges and muted tones. It was one of those mornings where everything moved a little slower, the kind where people paused before stepping out, uncertain if the mist would lift or settle in deeper. At the school gate, Damien stood beside his car, hands in his coat pockets, watching children trickle in one by one. Backpacks bounced, shoes squeaked, parents offered last-minute reminders. The air smelled faintly of damp sidewalks and sharpened pencils. He had no real reason to be there. No appointment, no meeting, no obligation. He simply felt drawn. A group of children passed him, including Micah, now in a bright red jacket far too big for him, but clearly chosen with love. He didn't see Damien at first. He was walking beside the same girl he had given the juice box card to, now unmistakably his friend. They stopped near the tree at the gate, trading cards from a crumpled paper envelope. Nothing expensive, just smiles, drawn suns, stick figures, and speech bubbles like, "You make lunch better," and "Thank you for your quiet." Damien stepped closer but didn't interrupt. Micah glanced up, then froze for a second, caught between surprise and delight. He jogged over with that same bounce in his step that had made an egg sandwich feel like a gift. "Sir." Damien crouched to his level. "Did I miss the pancake club?" Micah grinned. "Next week, you're on syrup duty." Then, without ceremony, he pulled something from his backpack. It was the old lunchbox, cleaned, carefully wrapped in newspaper. A small note was taped to the top. "For practice, in case you forget again." He held it out. "It's yours now." Damien accepted it with both hands. The old lunchbox, wrapped in newspaper and handed back to him. There was nothing dramatic about the moment, no orchestral swell, no perfect alignment of light and shadow, just a boy and a man, and the silence between them, thick with understanding. Micah leaned in as if sharing another secret. "Sir, I packed 2 sandwiches today. One's yours." Damien's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. Micah continued. "My mom says we can't change everything, but we can change some things. That's good too, right?" He nodded, swallowing the lump behind his tongue. "That's more than good." From the distance, Angela waved from the school steps, already in her uniform, already late. Micah turned and waved back, then looked once more at Damien. "I'll see you later, okay?" Damien nodded again. The boy ran toward the school, the fog parting as he passed through it. He didn't look back. The boy runs toward a new day. The man lingers behind, smiling. Damien remained there for a long while, the lunchbox in his arms, the sun keychain still in his pocket. No one asked him why he was standing there. He didn't need to explain. Because some things don't need explaining. They just need to be carried and practiced until they become who you are again. The final shot, a faded cartoon sun glinting in the fog.